Welcome to the Influential Personal Brand Podcast. This is the place where we help mission-driven messengers just like you learn how to build and monetize your personal brand. My name is Rory Vaden, and I'm the co-founder of Brand Builders Group, a Hall of Fame speaker, and New York Times bestselling author. And this show is to help experts learn how to become more wealthy and well-known. I know you're going to love it. Thanks for being here. Let's get started.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Influential Personal Brand Podcast. AJ Vaden here. And y'all, I am so excited to get to introduce you to a friend, but also a vendor. Like, we are a client of Eevi Jones. And when you learn about how we came to know her and what we did through her, I think it's going to spark some interest in all of you who have this passion of writing books or you've written books. And you're wondering, like, how does what I do not just apply to the adult world, but the children's world? And so I am very excited for this conversation because I know that if any of our content has application to adults, there is probably some sort of universal application to kids. And there is a really seamless and beautiful way that Eevi is able to take what we write, what we create for adults, and make it something that has appeal of educational value and motivation and inspiration for our kids. And as a mom of two young boys, there is nothing more important than me finding good books for them to read because there's not a lot of them. So let me also formally introduce you to Eevi Jones. She is a USA Today and a Wall Street Journal bestselling and award-winning writer. She's also the founder of Children's Book University. She does writing, she does co-writing, she does a lot of this under pen names, so you would never know that it's her, but she's authored more than 60 different children's books. She's been featured in Forbes, Business Insider, Huffington Post, Scary Mommy, EO Fire, Kindlepreneur. I could go on and on and on. And she lives in DC and also has two young boys. And I am so excited for this conversation. So Eevi, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, AJ. I'm really so excited to be here.
I mean, and I think this is going to be such a cool conversation, not just for authors, but for anyone who creates content and who also has kids, nieces, nephews, no kids, like, right, whatever it is. And I love the whole idea that whatever we create for adults, why don't we also think about just how does it have, universal application and benefit to our kids? And you have done such an amazing job for us. So just so you guys know who are listening, we'll talk about this later. But Eevi was behind the scenes and helping us take Rory's first book, Take the Stairs, and turn it into now my favorite kids book, slightly biased, but it's my favorite kids book called Be the Buffalo. And so she was able to help take this one memorable concept of a book written for adults. And Rory wrote this kind of poem, right? And then she was able to take that and architect it and found illustrators and printing and publishing and all the things that we didn't have to do. And we literally went from idea for this book to publication in just a few months. And it has been a dream of a project, and you have been so awesome to work with. So excited just to introduce you to our community. But those are all the things I know. So let me have you introduce yourself to our community. And I would just love to know, like, what is your background? How did you get into doing this? And just a little bit about your company so that our audience gets to know you.
Yes. Well, so your introduction was already so amazing. You already hit all the main things. So yes, I'm Eevi. I'm a professional writer and award-winning children's author and the founder of Children's Book University, where I teach fellow aspiring authors how to write and also how to publish their very own children's book. They always wanted to write and share with others. And so over the past few years, as you have already said, I have written and co-authored and ghostwritten over 60 children's books for children ranging from pre-K all the way to middle grade, which of course includes, picture books all the way to middle grade chapter books.
Mm.
And so the way I got into all this, I wrote my very first children's book back in 2013 for my then 2-year-old. He's my oldest, and he just actually turned 14. And so he's always so embarrassed when I tell this story, because my very first children's book was a potty transition story. So he was already potty trained, but he had a really hard time transitioning from a potty chair to a regular toilet. And yeah, because I couldn't find any books on this topic, I just decided to write my own. So my first children's book was really born out of this particular need. And so to this day, my boys are such a huge inspiration to me and my writing. And so the books I wrote throughout the years are truly, a reflection of the interests they had or the struggles they also faced over the years. And so, as for the teaching of other aspiring children's authors and the ghost and co-writing, especially within the entrepreneurial space, that's something I really just fell into.
Mm.
Um, so, a couple of years ago, I read Todd Herman's Wall Street Journal bestselling book, The Alter Ego Effect. And I know that Todd has been on your podcast before as well. And yeah, so I loved his book so much that I wanted to share it with my two boys. And so I turned a book of nearly 250 pages into a children's book with about 250 words. And so my boys loved it, and they loved it so much that I actually ended up reaching out to Todd and sharing it with him. And he loved it too, and so much so that we decided to co-author a children's book version for his book. And he was planning on doing so anyway, so the timing was perfect. And so
Wait,
that's how his children's book.
I want to pause really quick,
Yeah,
and I want to make sure
yeah,
everyone heard this, because I think this is really important for all of us when we're trying to do something and we think somehow that we need to charge for our services before we do them. Like, you're telling me that your whole business evolved because you saw something that you could do to serve your children. You did it for free. And then because of that, you said, "Hey, I just want you to know this is something I did." And that was the genesis for this entire business.
it was. Yes, absolutely.
I
That's so
just want to make sure
interesting. I
everyone, I
never
just want to
thought
make
of
sure
this.
everyone heard that, right? I think that's important that everyone knows
Yes,
that often your business starts with doing stuff for free and you make it so
absolutely.
good, it's undeniably impossible not to do more with you.
Yes, yes, yes. And so that's how his children's book, My Super Me, was born. And it's a story where a little hero puts on his cape and learns to play through the fearless traits of his superhero stuffed animal, Captain Storm, and where he finds the courage and resilience to show up in a more brave way and ultimately unlock his heroic self. And so yes, through this collaboration, this project, this opened up a whole bunch of new doors and opportunities that I am really just so grateful for, because Todd just kept introducing me to new people. So that's how that got started.
I love that. And really just out of passion and interest of how do I share this with my kids and how do I make something that helped me help them? I love that.
Yes.
I love that so, so much. So at this point, tell us how you work with authors, right? So I'll just, we'll use Rory as an example of,
Yes.
okay, so you've got this adult book.
Yes.
What does it look like to go from this book that was written for a business audience in this case to, and now we have something that would be great for a 3-year-old, 5-year-old, 10-year-old?
Yes. So in your case, it was, you guys, you and Rory reached out last year. And at this point, Rory had already written his beautiful story, which you guys called Be the Buffalo, right? Which I immediately fell into in love with the story, because writing in rhyme and reading stories in rhyme is just my absolute favorite. Just
Mm.
because reading these types of books to little ones is just so much fun for us grown-ups as well, right? Because we want to make sure that it's fun for us also, because we have to read these books over and over again to our little ones, right? Especially if it's their favorite book. And but those are also always the most difficult ones to write too. Many often don't realize that even though children's books are much shorter, it can be quite challenging to write them, often even a lot more challenging than writing a regular book for grown-ups. And that's because, children's books are a lot shorter, meaning we only have a few hundred words to share what we want to say. So every single word here counts. And even though the concept we want to share in our story may be quite complex, we will need to share it in such a way that it is both interesting to our little readers while telling it in such a way that it is easily understood. And
Mm.
so I think Be the Buffalo does just that. It's so much fun to read it, and this message is just so powerful. I wanted to actually tell you, my two boys that are now 9 and 14, so they are already a little bit older, but my husband and I both constantly use the phrase "be the buffalo" now. Whenever our boys are faced with a decision that might require them to choose between an option that seems easier at the moment and an option that seems harder at the moment but better for them in
Mm.
the long run, we use that phrase now. And so I know that Rory tells the story of the buffalo in his book Take the Stairs, and that the story has been shared many, many times over the years, often unfortunately without attributing it to Rory, right? So I really just love that it is now that he's now sharing this valuable lesson with little ones in the form of a children's book as well. And
Mm.
so, yeah, so the way this usually happens is people often come to me, um, not always, but often they come to me as a fellow entrepreneur, and they already have a book written on the subject of expertise, usually, right? Just like Todd Herman had the book The Alter Ego Effect, that shares how to unlock your most heroic self, or Brian Johnson, for example, with his book Arete, that shows us grown-ups to become the best version of ourselves. So they
Mm.
either have a book, or they have been teaching or coaching a particular topic, using a specific proprietary process that they would now like to also share with children in the form of a story. And so, what many are essentially looking for and asking for is to take the essence of their books or the essence of their teachings and then convert it into something that we can share with little readers in such a way that it is easily understood. And I really love this so much because what we are essentially doing is we are taking all these amazing teaching points that took us grown-ups decades to learn, right? And internalize, and we make them understandable and accessible to little ones, so they can learn about them in a fun and creative way, which then in turn helps them create these habits and healthy mindsets early on in life. And yeah, knowing what I know now, I would give anything if I could have learned about the power of the alter ego early on in life, or the power my words can have on others, or knowing that sometimes taking the seemingly harder path often turns out to be the better one, right? So instead of waiting until our 20s or 30s or 40s, we can share these incredible nuggets of wisdom early on with our little ones in the form of a children's book. Yeah.
I could not
So,
agree more. I could not agree more. Like one of the honestly, like just for everyone listening, like one of the reasons I wanted to have Evie on the show is because there is such a void of good kids books. Like I literally
yes.
find myself spending hours sorting through reviews, reading the first few pages, and then putting it back, putting it back. I'm like, nope, nope, this makes no sense. This has no story. This has no plot. And there's definitely no lesson that I want my kids to learn. And I love what you just said. And I think this is so important for anyone out there who is a content creator, whether you have a book, want to have a book, or you never thought about it, but you have a lot of content of why wouldn't we want to empower our kids, the next generation, with all of the life lessons we've already learned? Why should they wait till they're 20, 30, 40? I love that you said that, Evie, of going, no, like we have an ability to teach them those things now, like right now,
Hmm.
all the things that we wish we would have known. And we can do it through actually helpful kids' books versus some of the nonsense.
Yes, exactly.
So what
Yeah.
so what does it look like? So okay, so we'll just use like any book, right? So let's just say I'm an author and I have a, business book about, whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. And I'm like, yeah, I'd love to figure out how to turn this into a kid's book. Like, what do you do? Like you do have a gift. You've got some magic behind the scenes and doing this. And a lot of it's because you've done it for a long time and you've done it many
Yes,
times. But
right.
what does that process look like for the person going, yeah, I would love for my book to be a kid's book?
Yes. So usually what I do when people come to me is I actually read this book myself, and I'm very active within the entrepreneurial space. So I the chances are actually pretty high that I have already read the book. But either way, I will read the book and really also have a one-on-one conversation. What is it that you want to get out of this book, and what do you want little kids to get out of the children's book? And so then this will always help me really condense this message down, because that's what we need to do, right? Like I said, we have to turn 250 pages into 250 words. And so yeah, so once we're clear on the main teaching points or the main purpose of the children's book, we want to figure out what age group we want our book to be for. That's really, really important, because something most aspiring children's authors don't know or don't realize is that they need to be really clear on their audience, very much like businesses in general. But we need to know who we are writing our book for as well, right? Many often tell me that they want their children's book to be written for any child, so that no matter the age, whether they're 2 or they're 12 years old, everyone will enjoy it. But looking at our own kids, right, we know that that's just not possible. A
Mm.
2-year-old won't really enjoy what a 12-year-old is reading, and vice versa. And that's simply because we develop cognitively the most during our childhood. And that's why, there is such a vast difference in the use of vocabulary, and also the word count within children's books, and the number of pages and the number of illustrations and things like that. This is not random, it's all based on our target audience, the age group. And so that's why we want to be very clear on what age range we want to be writing for, so we can then choose the right length of words, or the right length of the story, and the right type of story.
So I have a
And
question for
so,
you about that. So
yes,
because this is basically figuring out what is your core target audience for your children's book. And so what would you say
right.
are like the age ranges? Does it go from like 2 to 4, 5 to 7, 8 to 10, or like, because
Yeah.
you're right, like even the books, like my kids grow out of books probably every year, if not every 2 years. So
Hmm.
that is a really interesting insight of like, you've got to be really micro specific of who your book is going after.
Exactly. So that the age ranges you gave is exactly that. And so based on each, it's, you make the story a little bit longer, or you can also use a little bit more challenging vocabulary. And so also, do we want to have illustrations on each page, or would it, for older kids, they only have, illustrations maybe a couple of pages, every couple of pages? How much text do we want to have on each page? Things like that. So yeah, it's really important.
That's really insightful because, what you said in the beginning is probably what I hear most people say is like, I want it for all kids. And it's like,
Yes.
you're right. A 2-year-old and a 12-year-old are very different and want very different books. Just thinking about that. I'm sure me and Rory even said that, like, we wanted to apply to all kids. And that's not
Yes,
how it is, right? That's
right.
really, really insightful of how narrow it must be for children.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah, and so that usually takes part of the story writing part, because I will then usually take it and write something. First we have a conversation of where I would like to take it based on the book, and then I write something, and then it's very much a collaborative work, right? Where we go back and forth, tweaking it, and just seeing where we would like to take it. Or sometimes it's either spot on, or sometimes we need to still tweak it a little bit, and so that's what we work on there. And so then after that, it's really about the visual part. This is what's so beautiful about children's books, because it's not just the story, it's also the visual, right? The through illustrations, which is always so much fun. And so um most children's books are passion projects, meaning we usually just start writing and then start envisioning the different illustrations. And that's really the exciting part for me as well. And so, because we are mainly driven by our passion, we don't really think about the more technical things, like the illustration sizes, or the book size that are available to us, or along with the orientation, should we have it landscape or the other way, and things like that. And so I remember wasting so much time with my very first children's book because I didn't think about any of these things, and so all illustrations ended up being the wrong size, and I essentially had to start all over again, and I lost so much time. And so before reaching out to an illustrator, we always want to already have these things in mind, know the size we want for our book, or at least have an idea. Or like you guys, you came and you said, we really like these llama llama books, and so that was really helpful. So that helps. And so we also want to already have an idea of what kind of illustration type we like, where we what we want our children's book to look like. Because if we start looking for an illustrator without already having some sort of vision, we can get overwhelmed really easily and really quickly, because there are just so many different styles out there. So we first want to get clear on what style we like and then go from there. And that's really, you already had a vision. So I could, that you shared with me, that made it so much easier for me. So that was amazing.
But I'll tell you, as content creators, that was the most challenging part for us. Like before we found you, which we're so glad we got referred to you, you know, I don't know if Rory told you how the Be the Buffalo came to be, but we were literally putting our kids to bed one night and I was tucking them in, and we always usually do it together. And Rory looks at me and he goes, "I have to go." And he just left the room. And I'm like, "Are you sick? Are you like, what is going on?" And he just disappeared. And so I finished putting our two boys down. At that point, Liam was probably 2 and Jasper was 4, and Roy disappeared. So like 30 minutes later, I went looking for him, like, what is wrong with you? Where are you? And I couldn't find him. And he was downstairs in his office. And so finally he emerges and he goes, "Babe, I just had a download from God. I just wrote a kid's book." And I'm like, "I'm sorry. What? What are you talking about?" And he goes, "I don't know what happened, but we were just putting the kids down and I literally just got this message and I just wrote a kid's book." And he goes, "Will you read this?" And I was like, "You wrote a kid's book in the last 30 minutes? What are you talking about?" So I pull up his phone and I read it, and I start crying. I'm like, this is exactly what we want to teach our kids. This is exactly the heart of the parenting that we want to have with our kids. And I immediately said, this has to be a book. This cannot stay with us. Fast forward 18 months, right? So like he had written that, and immediately we were like, we know we need an illustrator, right? And it took forever to find anyone who would even talk to us about it. And then we hired someone, paid several $1,000s, and it was like we would get an image or two every few weeks and not in a book format. And finally we were like, "Listen, you can keep the deposit, but we got to bail on this." And then Rory was like, "Babe, we just don't have time for this." Long story short, we finally got introduced to you. And from the time that we got introduced to you to like a book in hand was just a couple of months. And so much of the power of working with someone who knows what they're doing has a lot to do with, like, we didn't have to think of all the things. You said, "These are the illustrators I use based on what you told me. This is what I need from you. Fill this out, fill this out." And I share that because I think it's so important of going, we could have had this book out a long time before, because the book itself, the poem, right? It came in 30 minutes. But it took us 18 months to finally find someone who knew what the heck they were doing to allow us to create something. And that was you. And it was so much of the guidance and the coaching, and this is what I need from you next. This is what I need from you next. And the illustrations was a huge part of it, because we don't know. We'd never written a kid's book before.
Right.
We just knew that we wanted this for our kids and our friends' kids and any kid. Um, and I think that is what is the problem with so much of our businesses. It doesn't matter if you're writing for adults or for kids. It's like what you're good at is the content, right? But putting it all together, getting it printed, getting it in a course, putting it in a keynote, that's what stops a lot of us from getting the message that we feel called to share, from actually ever getting out there, are the technical and tactical things. And in this particular case, you take care of all of that if you want to put them in a kid's book.
Yes, exactly. Well, I'm just so grateful that you kept nudging Rory to really do turn it into a children's
More
book.
like harassing, but nudging, harassing. But it
Yes.
was because I felt so convicted. He probably would
Yes.
have been like, "Oh, babe, like someday," but I felt so convicted in it. But we needed a partner. And you
Yes.
were such a great partner in that. And I just share that for anyone who is out there going, "Oh man, like this is going to take a ton of my time." No, it did not. It really did not. Like the hardest thing
Right.
for us was to go through the illustrations and decide, this and that. And I will tell you that too, is like that also became one of our favorite parts of writing the kids' book was being able to help all of the characters in the book be reflective of our children and our family and experiences. And so it's like part of this is like it's for everyone else, but it's also a callback to the things that are important to us and experiences that
Yes.
we've been through. And even when my
Yes.
kids now, who are almost 5 and just turned 7, they will go through the book and they'll be like, "There's me." And they know
Yes.
that the characters that have been designed represent them. And it's a really special process
Yes,
to do it
absolutely.
for children. Like
Mhm.
it's been a very cool thing to not just write something for adults, which is very needed, but also to be able to do it in a way that speaks truth into our children. And so I have so many compliments on what you do and how you do it. I think it's a really unique service. And again, I cannot say this enough. We cannot withhold all of the lessons that we learn for adults just for adults. They have got
Yes,
to be shared
absolutely.
with our children, and you're a conduit of doing that. So, okay, so here's my next question. For the people who have content and books, how do they know when it's time to do a kids book? Or if they should do a kids book, is there some sort of like process of going, your book is good for translating into
Yes.
kids, or is there a checks and balances of going like, I love it, but it's not going to work for a kid? Like,
Yes.
what does that look like?
Mhm. So timing wise, I would say it really depends on what your goal is. Is it to really further your own brand, or is it really just a passion project about something that you always wanted to share? Because if it's the later, then you can start anytime. But if it's more for the branding, then I would say you want to be sure that you already have your own branding of your business dialed in, so that you know exactly what you want to share with children. So that's what I would want to wait for, not to come too early, because if you're still kind of trying to find your way, find your direction, your path, then this will also change the children's story, right? And so we wouldn't want that. So we want to wait until we are sure with our branding.
Yeah, so you want to be established in your
Yes,
personal brand,
exactly.
very
Mhm.
clear on your content. You have a direction, you know what you're going on. It's
Yes,
consistent, it's very well built out. So this is not something you would want to do in the early stages.
right.
Probably not something you would want to do before you even had a published book.
Yes, I mean, but if you have, a proprietary system that you're using, that you have in your course,
Mhm.
then you do not necessarily need a book.
Okay.
Um, yes, but it always helps me if you have material like a book, that always helps me just to draft your story. But I often also go through my clients' courses. So if they don't have a book, I go through their courses, and then I just get inspired there. So that also works.
But it's most important that you're just clear and established in who you are, what you
Mhm.
have to say, how you want to
Right.
say it, and there's well-defined content in some format.
Exactly. That's
Okay,
all
so
I need.
and then kind of my second question is how do you determine if the content is suitable to turn into a kid's book? Or have you ever told someone, I love your content, I don't think it's good for kids? Like, have you
Yes.
ever said that?
Yes, I mean, a lot of people think that a children's book about business just has to be really about business, like, marketing or selling or having a lemonade stand, because I see those books all the time, right?
Mhm.
But there is such a need for children's books that share values and concepts that are used throughout the entrepreneurial world. For example, ideas like, you are who you surround yourself with, or, how our attitude toward things drives our feelings and actions, or what persistence and consistency means, and what it can help us achieve, things like that. And that's really, this is stuff that is really near and dear to my heart, because if little ones, like I already shared, grow up with these concepts and understandings already ingrained, the knowledge will be theirs for life. Just like their language becomes second nature, this knowledge is simply a given, and simply they grow up with this, right? And so if you are asking yourself, is this worth a children's book? Then I would say, in today's fast and ever changing world, we all need to be asking ourselves, how am I impacting and supporting others with my life and my energy? How do I leave a lasting positive impact on my little ones that leaves them for the better long after I'm gone, right? And so my providing of these services is my attempt to help others do just that. So yes, I hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And I think it's what I hear you saying is that there's an opportunity no matter what your message is to find an
Yes.
application for it to be meaningful for kids.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. So then my next question is kind of like, how could this help you build
Mhm.
your personal brand? Like for the people that you have helped take their business books or just, books written for adults and turn them into kids. What are the benefits that you have seen from having a kids version of the product?
Yes. So for many of my clients that, so for example, Todd Herman, he uses his, and Phil Jones, I know that Rory knows Phil Jones, and you maybe also, they just take their children's books anywhere they go, because this is just another angle to share your own message, and this is why I was saying earlier, it's really helpful that if your children's book shares the same message as your own brand, right? If it ties together what you are teaching and what your children's book is teaching, if that ties together, that's really great. And that you can then later on share your message from different angles, because a lot of our clients have children. So then you can share your children's book that way, and tackle things that way. Or for example, my client Brian Johnson, with his book Arite, for him it is really important to reach as many people as possible. And so again, that's why he has this book Arite for regular people, but then he also has programs that reaches athletes, for example. So he wants to reach athletes, so he creates material that specifically targets them. And so that's why we wrote his children's book series, heroic, for his heroic brand, to reach children. And so that's, I think, how this ties it all together, just being able to share it with a different generation, the same teachings that are important to you, to be able to reach other generations with that message.
Yeah, well, I love it. Well, I'll tell you, for everyone who's listening and for you too, Evie, as a consumer, as a parent, I often buy way more kids books than I do adult books. Right?
Yes,
It's like
absolutely.
I pretty much am like, for every Christmas present for my niece and nephews, it always includes a book. For most birthday presents, because I want to give something that's not just a toy that's going to disappear in 3 weeks. I almost always include a book. Like that's just who I am. Maybe not everyone is like that, but I buy way more kids books. And when I find a kids book I love, I'll buy like 20 or 30 of them. Because then I'm like, I know your kid needs it. I know your kid needs it. I know you
Yes.
want your kid to have it. There's very few adult books that I'll do. I'll recommend them. I'll share them. But like the kids books, because kids can't buy them, I do that. And so for whatever it's worth to everyone listening out there, people will buy more books for their kids than often they will even for themselves.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree, especially what you were saying with as a gift, right? I very rarely give books, maybe my husband, I give him books all the time, but friends not so much. The only time when I do give books to friends and family is when it's a children's book.
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah.
for anyone who's listening, just going, it's kind of a big deal. And then I think another thing that we've really seen is just doing special times throughout the year of like where we package, you buy this book and you're going to get the kids book with it. That's
Mhm.
been also a really unique thing of like, hey, this isn't just for you. It's for you and your family. Here's the version for you. Here's the version for you to read to your kids. And it allows you to have a secondary way of processing the information. Like one of the
Yes.
things that, and we have Phil Jones's books in our kids' room, and then John Gordon has some kids' books of his adult books. And one of the things that has been really helpful for me is the way that you help simplify the books. I sometimes I'll just flip through Be the Buffalo as reminders of things that I won't necessarily pull out, take the stairs and flip through it because it doesn't have pictures. There's not that emotional visual reminder, and there's a lot of pages and a lot of words. But sometimes I'll just flip through it for those like quick, subtle reminders that,
Yes.
and I think part of it is because I love it in a poem version. I know you mentioned you do too, but the simplicity and the shortness of how quick you can get through that is a really
Exactly.
powerful reminder when I can only think of like maybe 2 books ever that I reread. Like there's just not a lot, but with kids' books, to your point, you're gonna read them until you're exhausted of them. You're like, "Oh my gosh, can we never read this book again?" But those reminders really mean a lot when they actually have a plot, a story, and a lesson. And it's just as
Yes.
impactful for me, the adult, the reader, and in this case, the parent, to read it to my kids as it is beneficial for them.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that you say this because that's what I get a lot about my own books also, that when people read it and it's supposed to be for children, but they say, "Oh my goodness, that was so amazing to just read for myself." So, and if you have a book like this, that's something special. If both can get something out of this. Yeah, I love that.
I love that. So, okay, 2 quick questions left, and I'll be sensitive to time, but how long does this process take? So if somebody's like, "Oh yeah, I've been wanting to do this," like, what is like a timeline of expectations to get something out into the world?
Yes. So your timeline was super short, right? And the reason why this is not always the case, the reason why was whenever I sent something your way for a thumbs up or your feedback, you were on it. So it really depends on my clients' feedback. How quickly can they return my calls or my emails and things like that? And so yeah, based on that, um, I don't remember, but it wasn't was it 3 to 6 months, right?
Yeah.
So it was
It was
really
not
quick.
long. It was not long.
Yes, and so yeah, around that time frame, I would say. But again, really depends on how quickly the client can respond. But I always try to write my story very quickly, thoroughly, but quickly, because I know that people are so excited, to get this going and to share it with the world. And so yeah, so I work as quickly as possible, and then we just always take it from there.
Well, I'll just tell y'all, if you haven't yet written a book, the idea of you could get a kids book out in 3 to 6 months is about 10x shorter than if you're going to write a traditional book for business or adults. And it was a really
Hmm.
seamless, easy process. But again, it was not until we found the right partner and the right vendor, and that was so much of a blessing of your part of the contribution of doing this. All right, Evie, last question. What do you think people need to know through the
Hmm.
process of considering or writing a kid's book? Like, what do you think is the most important thing people should know?
Yeah. Well, so I would say as a children's author is that if you've ever thought about writing a children's book, whether it is for your brand or as a passion project, I would encourage you to really look into it and just go for it. It's 90% of the people that hear that I write children's books, they tell me that they always wanted to write their own,
Mhm.
but so few actually end up doing so for various reasons. But really, it's never too late to write a children's book. Something people often are held back by is the thought that they don't have any experience either in writing children's books or in writing in general. Or oftentimes people share with me that they don't have kids, or that because of that they don't feel like they are fit to write a children's book. But there's no reason to think that having kids or not having kids disqualifies us to write a children's book. I have worked with many clients that also don't have children, or where the children are already fully grown and have already moved out. So it isn't necessarily about having kids or being around kids. It's about having been a kid,
Mm.
and remembering similar experiences or having overcome similar struggles that kids go through today. That's what will connect with little ones, not whether or not the author is around children on a daily basis. And yeah, it's just so funny too, because so many don't know that some of our most beloved authors, we remember from our own childhood, also don't have children or didn't have
Mm.
children. For example, Dr. Seuss, he didn't have any children. And Lewis Carroll, the author of Alice in Wonderland, didn't either, or Shel Silverstein, or Maurice Sendak, who wrote Where the Wild Things Are, or Margaret Wise Brown, the author of Goodnight Moon, all without children, and yet they all have. These are some of our most beloved children's book authors. So I think that's something to just keep in mind also.
Yeah, those are iconic books for the most part.
Exactly.
And I didn't know that. And what I love about what you said is this isn't about you thinking that this is for kids. It's what did you need when you were a kid? And
Absolutely.
how can you impart that gift to this next generation? That's so good, so wise. I love that so much. Everyone who's listening, if you're curious about this, if you're going, I would love to learn more about what it's like to write a kid's book or turn my book into a kid's book. Eevi has put together a special link just for our community, for our podcast listeners. So if you want to check this out, if you want to learn more, go to Eevi Jones. It's EEVI Jones.com/brand builders. So EeviJones.com/brand builders. I'll put that in the show notes. And she's going to do a 15-minute call for free with anyone who's interested. Most of her services are not for free. So this is a very generous offering of just to go like, what's it about? Could I do it? How would I do it? And what's the process like? So if you want to learn more, check her out. Eevi, if people just want to connect with you on like your preferred social platform, where should they go?
They can just go over to Instagram. That's Eevi_Jones. That's where you find me. That's where I am. And you can also message me there as well.
Awesome. And then one last bonus question for me, but if it's for me, I bet other people would like to know it as well. What is your favorite kids book to recommend to
Ooh.
other parents?
Well, I have so many because I write and read so often. I read so many, so I would say I absolutely love the Little Blue Truck series by Ali Shirtley, and the Llama Llama series, which I know you love so much, by Anna Dewdney, because they express so much with so little, so just so few words. And so for older kids, I adore Andrea Beattie's The Questionnaire series. If you are looking for something for your boys, she has books like Rosie Revere, Engineer, or Iggy Peg, Architect. So I'm really drawn, as you know, to rhyming stories because they are my favorite way of writing. And so for older kids, Mary Pope Osborne, her Magic Treehouse series, I absolutely love this one. And then, of course, I have to mention my favorite illustrators, who are Peter H. Reynolds and Lauren Long. I love them so much. So, yes. And then, of course, your book. I love it so much. I hope lots of people get it. It's absolutely adorable. And like I said, the first time I read it, I just knew it was something really special. And we use this phrase all the time now. So, when we see a set of stairs, or an escalator, and my boys move toward the escalator, say, "Be the buffalo," and we go up the stairs.
I love it. And I
So,
promise I did not ask her to say that. I did
no.
not. But like to that, I would tell you, it's like some of those books you just read are also some of my favorite for my kids to read, like the Magic Treehouse series
Yes.
is a very popular book for my 7-year-old. And I think a part of what I love about what you're doing is you're inspiring the next generation to fall in love with reading and more time in front of pages versus on screens. So I just want to appreciate all the work that you're doing. You're so gifted, and I'm so excited to introduce you to our audience. Y'all, check it out, learn more, go to eevijones.com/brand builder, connect with her on social media. I'll put all the links in the show notes, and then make sure you stick around for the recap episode that'll be coming up next. And we will see you next time on the Influential Personal Brand.
Bye.